for free speech. I don't really know what to think of it, so I'm going to bring in Mike Benz to discuss. Plus, I'll also be joined by FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin in just a few moments in regards to that veteran who sadly took his life in Las Vegas. That's according to the FBI, of course. There's a lot of suspicious circumstances, and Kyle was actually just on a space with Sean Ryan the other day reacting to the news. So he's going to join us in a few moments to break all of that down. Plus, Victor Avila is joining us because there's one state right now that's looking to push through legislation that allows illegal aliens to change their names, which would make it significantly harder for ICE to go after them if they have to. It's deeply concerning, and Victor is going to sound off in just a few moments. So we got a pretty busy show heading your way, so let's dive right in. We live in a really strange time right now. Mark Zuckerberg claims to have a change of heart all of a sudden, and he no longer supports censorship. He's pretending to be, or we'll be nice. We'll say he's now all of a sudden an advocate for free speech. Joining me to discuss, Mike Benz. He's the executive director for the Foundation for Freedom Online. And Mike, I'm glad to have you here today because I saw the video he posted on X. We're going to play a clip from it in just about a couple of seconds, but I'm a little hesitant, and I'm not really buying what he's selling right now. So for our audience, in case you guys missed it at home, let's play that clip of Mr. Zuckerberg saying he is now an advocate for free speech.
A lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political. But there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
All right, Mike, I'm not sure if I'm buying what he's selling. It does sound pretty genuine though. What do you think of all of this?
Let's go. I actually was looking around looking for my Trump wine. I'll tell you, I have a little bit of a different take on this. I agree with you insofar as you can't really trust Zuckerberg because he does not have the characteristic of bravery that is necessary for you to really depend on someone's word. But I actually think this has been a long, long time coming. I remember when Zuckerberg complained about too much censorship on Facebook in 2019 and was already signaling publicly in public speeches that he wanted to remove many of the hate speech provisions that were at that point already targeting hundreds of thousands of users on Facebook and was generating user pushback. But what happened next was a campaign called #ChangeTheTerms hit Facebook. It cost Facebook $60 billion, billion with a B, in market cap in just a few weeks. And so Zuckerberg, fearing for the financial safety of the platform, gave Change the Terms everything they asked for and externally delegated so much of its censorship infrastructure to these third-party groups, incorporated all the changes in the algorithms that were requested just to make the pain stop. You saw a similar thing flare up in 2021 with the COVID censorship. Zuckerberg did not want to censor user claims on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp about man-made COVID-19 issues, origins around COVID-19. But he was told by his global policy director, Nick Clegg, who was the former deputy prime minister of the UK, who wrote the book How to Stop Brexit after Brexit already happened and encouraged people to join Keir Starmer's Labour Party, the man who is now arresting thousands of people in the UK for memes and clicking the retweet button. But Nick Clegg convinced Mark Zuckerberg, in emails we now have because of Jim Jordan, that Zuckerberg needed to censor everything the Biden administration asked for because we have bigger fish to fry on multiple policy fronts with the Biden administration. So we should think creatively about ways to be receptive to the Biden administration's demands for censorship. And Zuckerberg pleaded with Clegg and said, can we at least tell the public that we're only doing this because the government told us to? And it appears the answer to that was no. So Zuckerberg sat on that for 2 years until there was a little bit of political safety. And I think, frankly, until Facebook had had enough because they felt betrayed by the Biden administration not fighting for them against the EU Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act. So it's a long way of saying I actually think Zuck does believe this, and he does have an ideological affinity with Elon Musk in that way. But at the same time, there is a moment where it's easier to do this now. In fact, it's politically beneficial. And so he can sort of get what he wanted before, but not have to take the risks that he did before, because now you have these hard charging heads of the FCC in Brendan Carr. You have these hard charging heads of the FTC and Andrew Ferguson. You have a Justice Department that is now, going to be totally flipping the other way. And you have a new State Department who is going to be aggressive about taking on foreign governments coercing censorship. And so all of these factors have shifted. So I think it's safe to sort of come out as a libertarian now in a way that was not before.
Yeah, and to be fair, too, to add to your point, when President Trump went through his first assassination attempt, I know Mark Zuckerberg said that he did reach out to President Trump to have a conversation with him, and that was a big motivator for him to jump on board as well. So hopefully he sticks to his word. But there's 6 key things that he's now changing. He's not doing the fact checkers anymore. He's moving to community notes. He's going to be getting rid of a lot of the restrictions for terms like gender or immigration terms, which is also really important because, transgender terms are constantly nuked by conservative voices who are speaking on their platform. And there's other things too, like he's going to be working with the Trump administration to make sure that countries aren't bullying American countries, which is going to be good for countries, for those in Brazil, at least I should say, because we all know that this Brazilian Supreme Court loves to bully American companies into censorship. So I am a little optimistic about this too. So let's hope he sticks to his word. But Mike, I have to ask you, because you did a great job at analyzing the footage of the pipe bomber that was released by the FBI magically. Just a couple of days ago, they found footage that they were able to release to us. And you notice there's a lot of editing being done to this footage. And it's really hard for folks like myself to run it through any type of program to maybe get some biometrics or any information off of it from that angle. What did you find from this video that you thought was concerning?
Well, it's actually the original footage. I've been sitting on this for several years. It's this is in March 2021 and then September 2021, the FBI released two different cameras from the DNC pipe bomb site. And this is, what you see here is what I call camera one. This is and I'll be releasing later this week, the same eyeblur they did to camera two. But there has been the FBI. I always say the FBI is where evidence goes to die. They are professional evidence destroyers. I think anyone who has seen what has happened in any high profile case where there's a whiff of government corruption or inside job or cover up, they have done this every time, all the time. You want to go back to Oklahoma City and all 22 video cameras being destroyed so that there was no way for Jesse Trentadue to be able to get those in discovery. You want to go back to the Jeffrey Epstein 2 security cameras being destroyed, the visitor logs being ripped out and non-recoverable. There's so many it'll make your head spin. But when I was very deep in the pipe bomb research events right after that happened, I was going through these pipe bomb videos. There were only 2 that were released, and the FBI just released a new video, basically for the first time in 3 years. That FBI page had not been updated since September 2021. But in both of the DNC camera footage, now remember, Watergate happened in this country because the DNC headquarters building was broken into. And yet somehow both of the DNC security camera footages were nuked down to 1 frame per second. That is 30 times less than the average 7-Eleven. And this is the party headquarters of the DNC. So it's very obvious that the frame rate was deliberately nuked before being made public. Now, likely the FBI sent this, they took the footage, as they always do in every investigation. They take all the original footage from all the locations. It's likely that someone at the FBI handed off the footage to a third-party contractor for processing so that there's some level of plausible deniability that it didn't happen in-house at the FBI. They can always claim an error occurred at third-party offsite. And then that was reduced down to 1 frame per second. Interestingly, this first one in this video was not, but that was when it was far away. It was before the DNC sites were nuked down to 1 FPS. Now, the nice thing about reducing it to 1 frame per second is not only do you have far less information than if it was published in its original form, which would be somewhere between 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second, continuous motion. But that means they only had to blur the eyes on about 4 frames instead of about 120 frames or 240 frames, and making those minor little adjustments every little time to the eye blur. But understand, the pipe bomber was wearing transparent glasses, which meant if a camera that is 20 feet away, you would be able to zoom in and see it. I remember when I first went into that footage and I went through all the FBI files that had been released on the pipe bomber, and I brought them into 100x zoom, 1000x zoom in the software I have. And I remember finally when I got to that frame on the park bench, I thought, we're going to get this guy. We're going to get the irises. And once you have the eyes, you can run that into facial recognition. You can do biometric scanning. If that person ever was in the U.S. military, their eyes would show up in a database. If that person ever had committed a felony, that person's eyes would be in a database. And if this person is out there planting pipe bombs, there's a very good chance that either they had a criminal record, in which case we'd be able to ID them from their eyeballs, or they were a former U.S. service person who knows how to make a pipe bomb. But amazingly, the only moment of horizontal blur bar activity is when that person's eyes are available, both in the 4 frames here and in the 3 frames from the second camera footage. So it's very evident to me, beyond the nuking of the frame rate, that they actually intentionally did not want the public to be able to see the eyes, because that would allow you to run those irises in a database and come up with a list of potential people. You could narrow it down to just a few potential suspects. And whether or not this pipe bomber was him or herself a federal agent or federal informant, it's quite possible that they were not, but that they were instructed to do so by a federal informant or a federal agent, just like in the Whitmer Fednapping plot, which involved dud pipe bombs, just like in the 3 Percenters case in 2017, which involved dud pipe bombs, just like as their favorite thing to do is get people to make dud pipe bombs. And so if you know the suspect, then the criminal proceeding proceeds to the network. And if it turned out the FBI had advanced awareness of the pipe bombs being planted, that completely inverts, not just stops the January 6th narrative. It completely inverts it, because the whole thing, this was the major mass casualty event threat of the entire day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the big issue with this. And, they always sit here. I was watching all these corporate media outlets. I think it was the day before. So January 5th, push at the fact that the FBI is still looking for this individual and they're still floating that $500,000 reward. But we all know that's not what they're actually looking for. And I just did the story too recently about New Orleans, the terrorist who had that horrific attack on New Year's Day. The FBI showed up to his home in Houston, and like you said, went through the evidence, and left some things behind. But given the fact that it's an Islamic motivated crime, why would you leave behind a Quran, any material related to religion? His laptop is still present. You see that in the video footage taken by the New York Post journalist. And the FBI didn't give me a response after I asked them specifically about that. They went over to other things and tried to distance themselves from the evidence question. But then they later, according to people, might have just showed back up. This is according to the Harris County deputies. They went back to the scene, shut down the crime scene again. And we don't know if the FBI actually showed up again, but it sounds like that they did, because they had those deputies go there for a reason to close it down. So again, it's like the FBI trying to initially bury a lot of evidence, a lot of key facts in all of this, and it creates more confusion and chaos than transparency, what they claim to be all about these days. So I think the only way we get these answers, though, in regards to the pipe bomber, Mike, is if we finally get some answers through an FBI director. Maybe Kash Patel could finally get to the bottom of this. Are you confident that Kash Patel would prioritize this and be able to get to the bottom of it?
It's possible. It's also possible, and if not outright probable, that the
Mhm.
key evidence has been completely destroyed
Yeah.
forever. For example, it would be hard for me to imagine if you were to get the original source footage that the DNC security cameras actually recorded, and that were to be public, and you could actually see the eyeballs and ID the suspect. We know from the weaponization subcommittee that it was narrowed down to a single suspect. It was something like 800 potential suspects, or 150 or something, and then it was narrowed down, and then FBI agents were waved off the trail once they had a Metro card and a license plate number. And so, I mean, it's very obvious what's happening here. The pipe bomb event, the pipe bomb was first. The first pipe bomb was discovered at 12:48 p.m., which was 12 minutes before the certification. Just 1 minute later is when the perimeter breach on the Penn Walkway entrance to the Capitol started. And so it was the breach was timed to the minute with the discovery of the pipe bomb. Stephen Sund, the Capitol Police Chief, even personally said he believed that the pipe bombs were planted as a way as a diversion, so that Capitol Police resources significantly underappreciated the threat that was happening actually at the perimeter, because the much more proximal and dangerous threat was a mass casualty event happening
Mhm.
just a few blocks over. And so they diverted resources. They were triaging. So the already understaffed area was tending to the pipe bomb rather than to the actual activity involving the breach. And so it's very clear if it turns out that this is just like the Whitmer case, it's just like the Tear Up Texas, Garland, Texas case, it's just like countless others before, Reed Terror Factory by Trevor Aronson, what they were doing all over the GWAT era. If it's just an ordinary course FBI operation, well, then the entire insurrection becomes a Fedsurrection in one still footage frame of a camera that we may never see.
Yeah. Well, I hope we do. I hope we do, Mike, because we got to get to the bottom of this, because everyone who is a part of it needs to be held accountable, but also we need to make sure it doesn't happen again, because it will if we don't hold these people accountable. Mike Benz,
Yeah.
as always, yeah.
I was going to say, and Trump today, I should note, for the first time, publicly came out and said the FBI knows the identity of the pipe bomber, and they're not telling us. So the fact that it's on Trump's mind today, I think, goes a long way towards political viability to getting that evidence publicly seen.
I love to hear that. That is very, very important. Mike Benz, thank you as always. Being an independent platform is very, very expensive, because I gotta be honest with you folks, I spend about 14 hours a day doing a lot of research on these stories we bring to you, because corporate media doesn't want to talk about it, but we do here. And this show isn't accepting money from any foreign countries or corrupt corporations. It's funded by you all at home. So if you'd like to support my work as an independent journalist, we've set up a platform for you to do just that. It's supportbre.com. That's supportbre.com. That's where you can make a one-time donation or become a monthly donor. Now, the monthly donations are critical because that helps us hire staff, so we greatly appreciate it when you do just that. It's safe and secure. It's all done through DonorBox, folks, so it is very easy to do. So head on over right now to supportbre.com. That's supportbre.com right now, because we couldn't do it without you. Many of you guys keep asking for my personal beliefs in regards to the veteran who took his own life allegedly outside of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Obviously, that explosion caught a lot of people's attention. Now, I'm very on the fence of this, and I don't want to. I just don't want to be wrong about it. It seems like to me that this might have been a veteran dealing with PTSD, but I'm not an expert. So joining me now to discuss is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. To discuss, Kyle was just recently on a space the other day with Sean Ryan discussing this exact topic, because Sean Ryan did release emails. Now, before we jump into this, I got to remind our audience that you're the host of the Kyle Seraphin Show on Rumble, folks. So head on over there, give that a follow, because you do a great job every single day. So, Kyle, I was listening to you, and I was listening to others on this call. A lot of people are skeptical about whether or not the email that's been floating around that was aired on Sean Ryan's show is authentic. The FBI said that they believe it's real. My personal beliefs, though, I'm a little concerned as to whether it was factually correct or not, and whether this was just an individual who is struggling with PTSD and just looking to go out maybe as someone who might have been a celebrity, someone who we're talking about right now. What are you taking away from all of this far?
So there are three kind of credibility questions. Number one is the email credible? As in, did it come from Matt Berger? Was it something that he sent?
Yeah.
We don't really know. The FBI seems to think yes. They're probably right, but there's some questions about that, so that's okay. Question two was the legitimacy of Sean Ryan and Sam Shoemate, who brought it to the attention of the public and did a podcast about it, and whether they brought that information in good faith with the best things they knew. It's my belief that they did, and there's a lot of reasons for that. We talked about it on a long Twitter space with thousands, 35,000 plus people listening. So the short note version of it is, if it wasn't credible and if they were doing it in bad faith, they would be facing potentially felony charges from the FBI for making false statements. And I know that because I helped coordinate get it to the FBI in Las Vegas. I don't have a ton of faith in the FBI all the time. The supervisor I spoke to seemed credible. The agent working there that I spoke to did not. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. Just means that they're struggling. So I think the email was brought in good faith. And then the last thing, the claims within the email, gravitational drives, whether or not there was a war crime being alleged and all this kind of stuff. I have no idea. I have no ability to vet that. I have no possibility of sort of validating any of that information. Probably most people don't either. So the most probable thing, based on the sort of, I'll call it preponderance of the evidence, I don't have any way that leans me 100% one way or another, but it's my most basic belief that this guy probably was suffering was from some kind of mental health issue. But that doesn't mean that was PTSD. People have depression, they have psychoses, they have all kinds of things that can go wrong. People who have had TBIs can have massive mood swings. They can have a change in medications. So it doesn't have to be PTSD, branded. There are a lot of mental health crises that focus on folks who have spent a lot of time in combat and dealt with a lot of these things, physical and mental ailments. I worked in a psych ward as a paramedic. I have friends who are veterans who have taken their lives. This is not a light matter. It's a sad matter. The thing that complicates it as well is there's a lot of people in the Green Beret community that are looking at this as a failure on their end. Like, we lost a brother. How did we fail this guy? And I don't think that's necessarily the case. Most people who commit suicide do one of two things. They either give us warning signs because they want us to stop them, or they hide it because they want to be successful. This man obviously looks like he was successful. I don't think we're looking at like a Colonel James Reese, like a Jack Carr novel where he's going to come out and be the good guy. Nothing would make me happier than finding out that nothing bad ever happened to him. And, he managed to swap out a body with one that was already dead. That's kind of a fantasy world. I had this discussion with actual Green Berets very recently. They're like, I'd love to see it, but the most likely thing is this guy had a mental incident, whatever it was, whatever the causes were, and, may have just gone off the rails. And it is a truly sad statement. It does tell us about the plight that veterans face in this country. We don't have enough good healthcare, and special operators are particularly vulnerable because they deal with the hardest things with the fastest and most rapid deployment schedules. So, my heart goes out to his friends, his family, and anybody that loved him and knew him.
Yeah, and that's the heartbreaking part in all of us, and that's why I just don't like floating things around, because you just really don't want to offend the family, because they've got a lot that they have to deal with personally now, and I can't even imagine the burden that they're dealing with. So it is really, really heartbreaking. Kyle, speaking of that, I actually wanted to get your take in regards to the terror attack that we saw unravel last week in New Orleans, because you and I were just talking about it, and I was also talking to Steve Friend about it. But we saw a New York Post reporter go through the home of the terrorists in Houston. And it was interesting for several reasons. There's things like the Quran, there's other religious material that's left behind by the FBI. There's also a laptop, which appears to be on a desk with a monitor as well. And so I was deeply concerned about all of this and reached out to the FBI and asked them about this. They told me that even though the terrorist attack took place on a Wednesday, okay, that on Thursday morning they cleared the home and they released it back to the property owner. And then the FBI, when I followed up and said, okay, but why didn't you confiscate any of this as evidence? Because this is clearly, you found an ISIS flag in the back of his vehicle. This is clearly a religious motivated incident, terror attack. I mean, you should take it with you. And they are refusing to respond. I tried 3 times getting them to answer that question. On the third time, I actually found out that Harris County deputies closed the house down on Friday afternoon, so a day after it was released back to the property owner, to gather more evidence. I asked the sheriff directly of that county, and I know it's a lot to go through. And the sheriff told me, no, like, we're not involved in this. This is the FBI. The FBI won't tell me if they went back for evidence. What should I make out of all of this as a journalist? Because I don't know what to make of it. Did the FBI go back, collect the rest of the evidence or not? It's very confusing.
They blew it so badly. They put somebody that had no business speaking on behalf of the FBI with a nose ring, who spoke inarticulately. I found out some stuff in the background about who she was and how she operated. It's not good. Apparently, she was involved in a threatened lawsuit. She may have been bought off by getting into that position. She doesn't appear to have been the right person, but she's a classic FBI, mid-level manager, somebody who looked for authority, didn't belong in there. And then when they were exposed, you know, operated at a level less than satisfactory. Let's call it that. First of all, addressing the claims of the things that were in the space. I can't believe they didn't take the Quran. I can't believe they wouldn't take a laptop. We took every phone if we could tie it to the person, especially if it's a single person residence, all the phones, all the electronics. You don't want to take too much, but Breanna, I've returned broken windshield glass to a man who was involved in a felonious, a homicide because the windshield was collected because there was blood on it, and the parts that didn't have blood and didn't get tested by the lab, we returned it. I gave back the headliner to a 1988 Jeep Grand Cherokee that was being held in evidence for 8 years because we collected it and there was no reason for it anymore. When you end the case, you return all kinds of crazy things. When you've seen the things that people like me have returned, I returned gloves that a guy used in a bank robbery. Like the actual gloves that he used. We grab everything when we do this kind of stuff. You always grab more than necessary. You can always give it back later. And, this guy's deceased. So you can grab everything without any fear of that being a problem. If there was any kind of fiber evidence, if there was kind of genetic material that you were going to look for on any of these things, if there was electronics, if there was evidence of a bomb, why would you leave any of the making factories? I can't believe they didn't grab the whole desk. And that printed receipt, which we saw, which looked really crazy to me.
Yes.
I reached out to a senior agent who's retired, and he said, the senior the national evidence team, which was probably called in to grab that stuff, they do a very professional job. I actually had a friend who was a supervisor on that squad. They're very good at what they do. They actually bring mobile printers and they enter all the evidence in as they're gathering it. So they can generate a typed up, very professional log. And that's why it was probably left in such a good array and in such a good, return state. But that being said, if they were being directed not to take everything, the people who decide what to take and not to take are not the evidence team almost always. It's nearly always the case agents. And what we're hearing about of New Orleans is there are so many people that are off work because of the holidays that they didn't even call them back in. They flew in agents from other places and had them try to do things, including things as minor as traffic accidents. They were having what we call TDY, or temporary duty agents, from other field offices. And they were saying, hey, investigate this traffic wreck because we're just overwhelmed and we're not calling our own people back to work. New Orleans is a disaster area when it comes to the type of things that are going on in the FBI. And agents from all over the place are just saying, Kash Patel can't get here soon enough. Please God, save us from ourselves. We just look ridiculous. And this was a pretty big deal, right before this new inauguration, this new administration coming in. We're talking about looking terrible right at a transition time. The FBI is basically blacking its own eye at this point.
Yeah, and they continue to do just that. I was really upset with all of this. I just think that they just don't want to get to the bottom of it. I think that they don't want us to know that this was an ISIS attack. I know the nose-piercing special agent came out and was like, it's not an attack. And then they had to correct themselves. I think it was 30 minutes later and put out a printed release and tell us all that they are investigating it as a terror act. So we'll see how that unfolds. I'm not really certain, Kyle.
You know what? The funny thing is in the last couple of years, they've changed some of the definitions on how they actually register terrorism and what constitutes a federal sort of terrorist investigation. And some of that has to do with what was done in the domestic space. There's a very real possibility that they couldn't specifically say that it was a terrorist act because it didn't have any demand or there wasn't an obvious way that they were trying to shift politics. So just terrorizing people with a terrorist ideology behind you doesn't necessarily equal it by the new definition. That's a real possibility that she was trying to technically weave this little needle. All Americans knew what this was. They looked at it and said, somebody went out there and went after New Year's Eve revelers and tried to make Americans not feel safe in America. So why that was specifically, and we've got, it's also kind of an orgy of evidence. That's the other piece. I think a lot of people were looking at it going oh my God, what is this, Minority Report, where Tom Cruise said, deploys in and all the evidence is all perfectly there. It does look too easy, but we catch the dumb ones, and people who are going to die and not make it back from something they do. They don't really worry about cleaning up the scenes as much. So anyway, there's a lot of questions. When you have a competent FBI, you don't have to ask those questions. We wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd say, hey, they're on it and we have good trust. We don't have that. So we got all the questions.
I've got nothing but questions these days. But I wanted to get to your personal story because I think that's a really good one that we need to highlight again. I mean, Kyle, you and I have something in common. We're both COVID deniers. We didn't believe in the vaccine and mass vaccinating people, and both of us were out of a job because of it. But yours is a little bit more different than my side of all of this. You rejected the COVID testing. I also did as well. But when the FBI was looking for a reason to put you on suspension, they didn't go with the COVID one. They went with an interaction you had with a resource officer. Now, you've just recently republished a lot of this recorded phone calls and the body cam footage regarding this. So I want to play it for our audience and then get you to detail the behind the scenes on all of us and how this all unraveled right after. So let's jump to that real quick and we'll be right back.
Do you know that I don't even know what the allegation against me is? They're just...
No. The one for me, I have there's one allegation and it's in the paperwork, the letter that you signed. It's right in the sort of top.
It says that I was unprofessional. Yeah, it says I was unprofessional to a police officer and my coworker. Is that correct?
That's it.
But that's not a specific anything. Like the only time I've talked to a cop was on body cam. I assume you have that footage, or do you not?
Yes.
You have. The footage speaks for itself, so that's a case closed. That's the end of it. There's literally nothing there. Nobody can argue otherwise.
796. I'm familiar with a gray pickup truck with black wheels and a black camper in the desert area.
Copy, sir. Please, gray pickup truck.
How you doing? Not bad. Hey, I'm not sure if this is county or city, but everybody's freaking out over there at the school, man.
It's
county. You can hear it over there like nobody's business.
Okay.
I know there's a range on the other side of town and it's far away.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, if you can go further in the desert or something, I get it. You're shooting against a berm. You're not shooting towards the school or anything, but it creates issues. So what department are you with?
I'm with the FBI.
Okay. Yeah, it's just probably not the best place to be shooting.
So, I mean, people shoot out here all the time. Is it just because it's at school or what?
Well, it creates issues, yeah. I'm not saying that you would, but some people are responsible.
So I guess the question, so first of all, I'm positive this is county land,
Okay.
right? I'm more than 300 yards away. In fact, what is that, like 150 is requirement or 100?
I don't even know exactly what it is, to be quite honest.
Whatever
with
it
you,
is,
but
I can
everybody
reach
over there-
that, and I know that we're 800 yards away from the school minimum, yeah?
Okay.
So legally speaking, I'm still within the range.
Okay.
I'm out here to work. I'm out here to train. I get some time off, so I'm kind of using it.
Okay.
I'm not trying to create an issue for you, but I'm well within the range. Like
I
the
get
law,
that, but you have
know.
to understand where we're coming from. I mean, it's one of those things where
No, I totally get it, but I'm just saying if we're gonna, yeah, I don't have the time to drive out there.
You got your ID on you by chance?
Too?
All right.
Okay, so you are very nice. You're not being aggressive, but
It
for
gets
some
even
reason-
nicer after that. I mean, we had a laugh at the end of this.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you detail it all.
It's real simple. You know, I was actually on AWOL because I wouldn't do COVID swabs up my nose every 72 hours. I had a top secret clearance and I'd been a paramedic for a decade. And I told them that I had a religious problem with discrimination of anybody, including myself, and specifically Christians at that time, because I said anybody can get this disease. And so whether I'm vaccinated or not vaccinated against it is irrelevant. Plus, I already had the disease. So I'm not going to test for a disease I don't have. That's what I just told them. And they said, you can't come into the office. So this is in February of 2022. Go back a little ways. This is the reason why I'm in the situation. In September of 2021, I gave them a religious accommodation request. I said, I'm a devout Catholic and I'm not getting the shot for pro-life reasons and the way it was developed. And a lot of people had the same sort of experience. Mm-hmm. In October of 2021, I went to my Congresswoman, Yvette Harrell, who was representing me at the time. And I just said, look, these are some problems I got going on in the FBI. One of which was that the FBI was investigating parents at school board meetings, which seemed to contradict the testimony of Merrick Garland while he was in front of Congress. And so my belief was that he had perjured himself because I got an email saying that the FBI was going to do this under the counterterrorism program based on the email coming from the, I think it was the DAD of counterterrorism at the time. So that was all kind of troubling. So I have these immediate problems with the Bureau. They immediately tell me that I have to start doing something like testing. I decided not to do it. And I'm out in the desert shooting. Cop comes up. We're having a nice conversation. He's very polite. I was not as articulate as I would like to have been, as is often the case when you jog up in the desert. I've been out there shooting I'm dehydrated, I guarantee it, because it's the desert. And so what I wanted to try to convey to him is that he didn't have the authority to ask me to do that. And I knew right when I walked up that he was going to ask me to do something and I was going to say no, which is an awkward thing to do. One, as another law enforcement officer, but two, as any American citizen. If you have a cop come and say something to you, your most likely thing, if you're a law-abiding citizen, is to probably comply. And my concern is that he was going to ask me to do something that he couldn't order, and then he could do it to anybody else. Here I am. I got a badge on. I got a gun on. I'm a federal agent right next to federal lands. It's private property that was available to the public in the county, and he was a city cop. And he seemed like a really nice guy, and I got no problem with the officer. Like, our interaction was fine. But I knew that my friends go out there and shoot. And I know that we were standing on that thing. And in fact, if people watch the whole video, they'll see I posted pictures of where we were standing, and we're standing on shotgun shells. And later on in the video, he says, people shoot out here every day. I hear it all the time. And there was no report at the end of this. Like, he didn't write up a report because I didn't break any laws. I didn't actually violate any policies. In fact, I cited the policy, which he claimed not to know, which is that you have to be 150 yards away from an occupied structure. I was correct with my assessment. I actually have rangefinder footage from that area. I was 865 yards away from any occupied structure. And by the way, the statute for the state also exempts law enforcement. So it didn't even matter as a law enforcement officer who was on duty, which I was always on duty because I was in the FBI. So all of those things are really silly. But what we found out is that the FBI was going to take something that was nothing. And the only reason they knew about this is because I self-reported it to my boss. I said, listen, I had an interaction with law enforcement, and per policy, I'm reporting it to you. He went on his own. We'll call it sua sponte for my friends who are in the Ranger battalions. He went out there and he got himself a copy of this body cam footage with no investigation into me and no justifiable law enforcement purpose. And he showed it around to all of the folks in my office. And in his signed sworn statement, where they went after me with it in the Internal Affairs Division, the reason he explained that he got the body cam footage was because he believed I was being an a-hole, although he said it all the way out. And he wanted to confirm that he was correct as my boss. And that's why he showed it to the new employee who just got out of a Quantico. He showed it to our secretary. He showed it to every other agent in the space. He showed it to my future boss. None of those things are permissible as an FBI supervisor or as an FBI agent. You don't get to just do investigations and get law enforcement resources because you think someone's being an a-hole. There has to be an actual problem there. And there wasn't. So they created it. That's what actually got me thrown out. And then the phone call that I had with this lady was absolutely hilarious. It was the last time I spoke to someone from the FBI before last Thursday, because they know if they call me, I'm going to record it because I live in Texas and it's a one-party consent state, and I protect myself when the FBI calls me. I recommend most people not speak to them. I've got a little bit more of a game that I'm playing here with them, and they don't seem to like it. They keep losing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there was zero purpose in any of this. And like you just cited, there's obviously motive. I think that they were probably just gunning for you at that point. We're looking for anything to validate why they were to put you on suspension without pay. And again, for our audience, remind us what the suspension is like, because I know I saw that you posted that you were in an RV, you were 6 months without pay. What is it like being an FBI agent who has to go through this process?
So I stopped being paid. I got to take leave from November 23rd of 2021 until the first week of January of 2022. Then I stopped being paid. I wasn't paid again until I went back into the office on March 4th
Mhm.
of 2022. And then they removed my gun, my badge, and my paycheck. That happened in April of 2022. And then I lost the paycheck on the 1st of June. I went from June 1st until I quote unquote resigned April 23rd, I think, of 2023. So over a year without any pay, plus the 2 months previously, I've estimated about 14 months without any pay. My wife and I sold our house. We looked around and said, we have no income. We have no tie to New Mexico. We have no reason to be here if we're going to spend mortgage money. So let's sell the thing. It was a decent time in the market, and we're going to just have to live off the proceeds from our home. And we sold it in a very short time. I'd only lived in that house for 17 or 18 months. So we just gotten there. Then I got kicked out of the office. We sold the place. We moved into a small RV. I literally left the closing table, Breanna. I don't know if you know this. I left the closing table selling my home. So my family was officially homeless, drove down to the El Paso airport, flew out, did the first podcast I ever did with Dan Bongino with no home at the time. Came back, the story went public. I got into my truck, which I owned free and clear, and I drove to Arizona to my folks' house where we had the RV, and we ended up staying in 2 bedrooms of my grown parents. I was in my 40s. I stayed with my parents who had a 3-bedroom house. I moved a family of 5 into their 2 extra bedrooms, and we just occupied space there for 6 months with no income. And that is a real rough thing to do to your pregnant wife and your 3 babies. And so that happened. And I would do it 10 times out of 10. There's no question I would do it again because we were right. But it's still not very fun when you're doing it. And so we're kind of seeing a little bit of validation and vindication. The video that you just showed has been shared something like 700,000 times on X right now. So screw you, FBI. We remember, and we're not done with you.
Yeah, and that's the key point in all of this. We need to remember, because I think so many people are just very confident that President Trump has won the election and that it's certified now, and so they think that everything's going to be easy breezy moving in, but it's not going to be that way. They're going to put up a fight. Kash Patel obviously, hopefully, gets confirmed as FBI director. But Kyle, how does the agency make things right with you now moving forward?
Well, I've asked that they settle the lawsuit. I have an active lawsuit, as you guys can imagine. I've got one that is for 3 different pieces, and I'm the only person in my lawsuit. There's 17 of us in the total lawsuit in different buckets. I'm the only person that touches all 3. One of them is called disparate impact. It's a civil rights claim. The other is religious discrimination under Title VII. And the last one is constructive termination, which means they fired me without saying they fired me and made me, quote unquote, resign. I've asked for them to pay like a significant amount of money plus punitive damages. I don't know if they will or not. It doesn't really matter. It sounds like they want to depose me. They should be aware. I'll just say it like publicly. I've been saying it privately. I consider a deposition to be a chess game and a blood sport. So bring it on. You have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with when you ask to sit down in a taped interview with me, because I will go all day with you. And like, I don't even need to eat. I'm a carnivore diet guy now, so I can go for like 24 hours. So this should be very fun if DOJ wants to play that game. But, they need to make people like me whole. They need to make Garrett O'Boyle whole. They need to help Steve Friend back out. Some of these guys need to go back and work for the agency again. If there's a job that Cash has in mind for me, I'll come and do work for him in a heartbeat, even though I don't want to. I actually hate Washington, D.C. I hate the idea of moving back there with my family because I lived there for 5 years, and my children, 3 of my 4 children were born in Virginia because we were there. I'll go back. I'll go back into the swamp and work for a couple. We got to see it through, whatever it is. But this fight is just getting started. Donald Trump's certification is basically like the starting bell, I think, and his inauguration will be the real start of the second side of the storm. We're kind of like we're in a hurricane right now. We had 4 years of chaos. We had a little bit of an eye of the storm where everything kind of took a little break, and we're about to get back into it. If we don't think there's going to be terrorist attacks and leftist upheaval and wild media slander and all the other crazy things that are going to happen during the confirmation hearings, we should see Brett Kavanaugh 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. It's all going to get really ugly. So people need to strap in and get ready.
Yeah, no, 1,000% it's gonna get real ugly, and I keep warning people that there's already a lot of chaos, and I think it's all intentional that's being created, and we'll see it all unravel. I mean, I'll be there at the inauguration. I'm sure it's going to be something very interesting. I'm excited for it, but I'm also a little on edge because you never know what these people have up their sleeve. I can't imagine them just handing over power peacefully and just allowing President Trump to take back the White House. So, Kyle, we'll see how it all goes down. I want to remind our audience that you host a great show over on Rumble, just like this show, the Kyle Seraphin Show. It's available. Give it a follow. You're going to want to do just that. Kyle Seraphin, as always, thank you, sir, for your time. In case you didn't know, this show is also available as a podcast as well. So if you're a fan of Spotify, Apple, Amazon, any of your podcasting platforms, I could promise you the Breanna Morello Show is there. Definitely give us a follow. And if you enjoy my content, share it, because that is how we save this country, by sharing unfiltered, independent voices. I got an interesting tip from one of you actually sending me this article. I got to say, it's a good one too, because this should be on your radar. In Illinois, there is a proposed bill that would help illegals avoid getting arrested by ICE. Ultimately, what it does is it allows those who change their name to kind of just start with a fresh new start. And that's going to be a problem, folks, especially if you're illegally living in the United States and you're trying to flee a federal agency or even local PD. So this is something that Republicans in the state are trying to sound the alarm on, and rightfully so. Joining me now to discuss is Victor Avila. He is with us now. He is a retired HSI ICE agent, and he joins us now. Victor, sorry, so many letters in that one, but I'm glad you're with us, of course, because there's a lot to dive into on this. I know people in the area are concerned, and Republicans especially, that just the simple change of the name could allow illegal aliens to flee and to just avoid potentially being deported. And this would affect violent criminals. So what do you make of this? Because Republicans are deeply concerned.
Yeah, a couple of things is very concerning. One, obviously, the identity of the person, which is one of the biggest concerns that we have with the millions of illegals that have come into the country, is to know exactly who they are to begin with. But here's the concern where it begins. It actually begins at the border, because we might not actually know the exact identity of the person. Remember, Biden and Harris allowed, and along with Mayorkas, allowed these people to come in and say whatever name they wanted to say, put their fingerprints down, and take a picture and all that. But we took their information at face value. There was no vetting of that information. So the illegal alien said his name is Jose Lopez. That's what we went with. Now, imagine that. That's one identity plus a second from his true identity. Then if this law actually goes through, it might be potentially be a third identity that would really, what it does, it would provide cover for illegal alien less be detected by police. Now, I understand. I was reading the proposed law about how it kind of falls on the shoulders of the police there in Chicago. And can you imagine how overwhelmed they would be with the number of illegals in just in the Chicago area that we know are there, that have gone there? We've seen the problems that they had at the airports and around the city. And so they're kind of saying, well, no, the police are going to check these names, but it's going to be the same problem, Breanna. Is like it's not like one or two that they could check. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of them, potentially maybe in the millions. And that's where they create the backlog, where all this time it's advantageous to illegal to to hide from authorities.
Yeah, and Democrats are like experts at causing chaos, and I think that's what they're trying to do here to help these individuals fly under the radar, and that's exactly what it sounds like this bill is going to try to do. So we'll follow it and see how it ends up. But I mean, again, I was following actually a tip that was provided by me from a member of the audience, and it was about a separate case regarding a murder, potential murder, and this individual was not a U.S. citizen and had multiple names, and police were unable to catch up with them. So every time they pulled this individual over, whether it was a traffic stop or something similar to that, they didn't realize that this person was wanted by ICE. And it's just something that's a real issue in this country. And I really hope we get to the bottom of it, because these individuals, we take their biometrics. I mean, this shouldn't be that difficult for us to be able to do if you're not a U.S. citizen, to take your biometrics whenever you have an interaction with law enforcement. I think that would be really important and would actually improve our safety in this country. But speaking of just that, Victor, you actually flagged something for me. It's in regards to Mexico finally being open to the idea of taking on Mexican migrants in if they're deported by the United States. Now, this is different because the Mexican president, she's sounded really tough, and she's been actually quite nasty to President Trump, but she seems to have a bit of a softer approach right now. What would this do right now for our mass deportation plan if Mexico actually did this and accepted those non-Mexican migrants who were deported by the United States into their country?
I think Mexico is realizing, especially the president of Mexico right now, that she's not going to have a lot of options here and a lot of choices when it comes to dealing with the United States. I think initially they're trying to treat the Trump administration like the Biden administration to see how much they could get away with. And they're finding out very quickly that they're not. They're not going to get away with anything anymore. We're sick and tired of Mexico not participating in deporting these people from the country. Remember, they came in through Mexico, millions of them from all over the world in Mexico, and they were okay with that. Initially, they said, "Well, you're not going to allow them to deport them back into Mexico." Well, why can you allow them to come in but not to be removed through your country? And obviously, she walked that back. And there's a lot of things, I think, happening in the background here. I think there might have been a phone call involved somewhere here saying, no, you will accept them back. And as a matter of fact, I hear from my sources that Mexico is making many arrangements as far as facilities to accept these people from wherever country they are. The U.S. is going to do, and ICE is going to do several things here. One, we might not necessarily want to take them to Mexico. Some, it'll be easy, especially maybe Central American countries. But if we're talking about someone from China and Africa, we might want to take them further away from the border, because the closer they are, and I could tell you this based on experience, the closer they are to the border, the easier it is for them to make the attempt to come back into the country. Even though our border will be more secure, Border Patrol will be back on the line, they'll still we don't want them to have that easy opportunity to come right back. And that's one of the issues that we've been dealing a lot for the several years is these prior deports coming back into the country. And so I see Mexico backpedaling. A lot of things I think you're going to see with Mexico a lot, Breanna, is you're going to see the Mexican presidents be saying a lot of different things publicly. And in the background, there's believe it or not, there's going to be some participation, which I'm okay with. We want Mexico to play ball here with the U.S. When it comes to the cartels, the fentanyl, and all the other illicit things that happen from their country into ours. We want them to play. We want them to cooperate. And they might not want to say it publicly because, they're very proud and they're a sovereign country, and they're going to throw all these excuses and kind of cover for them. But I think below all that, there is going to be some covert, if you will, cooperation, and I'm okay with that. I don't care what they call it, what they name it, as long as the problems start taken care of, starting in their country. I think you're going to see some major changes.
Yeah, I think so. And just to remind our audience too, you don't get elected in Mexico as a politician if you don't get the blessing from the cartels. So I think a lot of the on-camera stuff that you're talking about is just all going to be, like I said, in front of the camera. But she's going to have to comply because President Trump is a lot scarier, and we need to shut down what's going on right now because the cartels. I mean, we just saw it was Kyle Seraphin. He just was like before we did an interview with him. He's like, "Hey, Brad, did you see this?" And it was like a rocket launcher that he says could take down like helicopters and all these other things. And he's like, that was going, like, a border patrol caught it going to Mexico. And so we have to get serious about this because not only does it put Americans at risk, but also Mexicans. I mean, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't want border security because these gangs shouldn't be able to just transport weapons like that so freely. And the scarier part is that was either made here in the United States or it somehow got here and is being sent to Mexico. So I don't know what side it is on that one, but it's horrifying to think about. But Victor, I wanted to get your take on another one because this is another horrific situation. Earlier this week, two migrants, Venezuelan migrants, did kill, and I keep saying migrants, I should say illegal aliens. I'm correcting myself on this one. Did kill an immigration agent in Mexico. So I want to talk about this because and you messaged me about this. I believe there's some ties to the Trene de Agua, I always pronounce it, and everyone laughs at me in the chat, gang. And that's the Venezuelan prison gang that's made its way into the United States. So tell us a little bit about this story because I think there's also an interesting connection between the gang and Iran as well.
You're going to hear a lot more about this. I'm one of the ones putting it a lot as much as I can. But I hope more people, as the days go on, really start talking about the connection of Tren de Aragua, which is affiliated with the prison, but really they're affiliated with the Venezuelan regime over there. A lot of them are Hugo Chavez sympathizers. Even they go back before Maduro. These are terrorists. That's what they are. And why are they terrorists? Because they're working very closely with Hezbollah. And who is Hezbollah working with? Very closely with Iran. Iran knows that Hezbollah has this relationship with Venezuela. They've been established there. The DEA has done some tremendous work years ago with identifying Hezbollah working with the Mexican drug cartels. Why? Because it helps them finance their terrorist activities. They need the money. And so now they've made their way through South America into the Tren de Aragua, which we know how violent these guys are. They just, like you mentioned, they killed this guy, this immigration officer in Mexico, right on the other side of El Paso, Texas, by the way. And that happens to be their hub. And that the intel that I'm getting is that's where Tren de Aragua wants to come in through Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, Texas. And what they're doing is a lot of them are coming in, turning themselves in because they know that even if they put their fingerprints down in our system, they're going to come back negative, and they will actually allow them, believe it or not, until January 20th, they will be allowed to come in. Now, there's others that might have some kind of other criminal histories and other databases that they know, so they're coming in completely smuggled, undetected. That's a big issue down there right now. It's a big problem in El Paso and Juarez. They're seeing that. They're seeing the caravans that is another one, by the way, is on its way, mostly of Venezuelans, and they're broken up. They're broken up in what they call the ant operation in smaller groups of 80, 120. You're not going to see 1,200 people at once because they don't want that attention anymore. Their goal here is to make it inside the country of the U.S. before January 20th.
Victor, it's so infuriating when you think about how our federal government has allowed all this to happen. I get it, it's under the Biden regime, and everyone thinks that on January 20th, it's going to be a brand new page for us. But to undo the damage that they've done over the last 4 years and pray that there's not a terrorist attack or any attacks, we just saw one on New Year's Day, which tells me that was a message sent to Americans that that's probably the first of many up their sleeve at this point. It's horrifying to think that they've subjected us to this level of just vulnerability. But it's not surprising given the Biden regime's history. And it's got us all on edge. I mean, I hope President Trump is able to turn this around and help us out and make sure that we are safe and secure in this country. But he's got a lot of work and a lot to unpack. So we'll see. Victor, your final thoughts.
I'm going to say really quick, I'm glad you're saying that because I know we all did our due diligence on November the 5th, and we voted President Trump in. but that doesn't mean that we get to go and sit on the couch now. This is so important that we need to help in our community as much as we can. It's going to be up to us. It's not over. It's only the beginning. So stay engaged, get even more engaged in your local community, because we are going to need the help of everyone, our local police and everyone, to help President Trump in the bigger picture when it comes to securing our neighborhoods, our nation, and of course the foreign policy attached to it. It's going to be all up to all of us to do it.
Yeah, it is up to all of us to do it. And we all need to have our head on a swivel at this point and make sure we're on the lookout for things, because I have a bad feeling that they picked New Year's Day for a reason heading into 2025. So we'll see. Victor Avila, as always, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
The best part about this program is we get to pick who we allow to sponsor this show. And I only want to pick companies that believe in the same things that you and I both hold near and dear to our hearts. And that's why I've got a great product that I think you probably are already familiar with, but you got to check out because there's a great sale going on right now over at mypillow.com. Mike is having, and this is one of my favorites because you guys know I'm a big fan of those slippers. He's having his closeout sale on both the female and male slippers. And it's also the sandals as well. Make sure you use promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE at checkout. He's also got the bed sheets, the pillows. Everything's on sale with that promo code BRE. You guys, support a patriot who supports the same things that you and I believe in. I mean, he literally fought, and they tried to bankrupt him for the election integrity issues that we truly do believe in. So if you haven't already done so, or if you need to buy someone a gift or a birthday gift, do it now. Head on over to mypillow.com and use promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE to save up to 66% off at checkout. Are you enjoying this show? I hope you are. If you are, make sure you give our main page a follow on Rumble. It's the Breanna Morello Show. We are also available as a podcast as well. Give us a search. We're on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And it's the best way to stay in the know because I've got a lot of exclusive content dropping soon. Well, that does it for me tonight. Thank you so much for joining. Now, we've got a great show in the bag for tomorrow as well. I'll be joined by two great members of Congress. We don't say that about many, but these are the good ones. I promise you that much. Plus, we've got a very interesting story in regards to Fani Willis and the losses she's been stacking up. That's going to be coming your way tomorrow night. So make sure you tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Until then, folks, have a great evening. I'll see you here tomorrow.